Imagine standing atop a scaffold of ice, 20 stories above the earth. The wind in Sochi or Pyeongchang doesn't just blow, it screams. Below you lies a slopestyle course, a chaotic playground of jagged steel rails and massive kickers that look less like sports equipment and more like launch pads for space travel. You have 20 seconds to defy gravity or let the mountain break you. This isn't just about gold medals. It's about the day a group of rebellious kids from the American backcountry turned a fringe hobby into the most watched spectacle on the planet. Chapter 1. The Outcasts of the Mountain. The story of men's Olympic slopestyle doesn't begin with a starter pistol or a national anthem. It begins in the 1990s in the no snowboarding zones of Vermont and the Sierra Nevadas. Back then, if you were a snowboarder, you were a vandal. You were the knuckle-dragger ruining the pristine moguls of the elite skiers. But while the world looked down on them, a subculture was hardening. These athletes weren't training in state-of-the-art gyms. They were jumping over frozen picnic tables and sliding down handrails in suburban parking lots. This street DNA would eventually become the backbone of slopestyle. Chapter 2. Sochi 2014, The Birth of a Legend. The year is 2014. The world is watching Sochi, Russia. The Russian government had spent $50 billion to build a winter wonderland, but the slopestyle course was a nightmare. It was too big, too fast, and dangerous. Shaun, the king of the halfpipe, looked at the course and walked away, citing safety concerns. The American hopes rested on a kid from Silverthorne, Colorado, named Sage Kotsenburg. Sage didn't look like a traditional Olympian. He didn't have a coach in a headset or a rigid diet. He ate onion rings for breakfast and spoke in a dialect of stoked and rad. While the Norwegian and Canadian riders were practicing triple corks, highly technical robotic rotations, Sage decided to do something weird. Chapter 3. The Holy Grail of Style. On his final run, Sage Kotsenburg did something the judges hadn't seen in years. He performed a holy Crail. It wasn't the most rotations ever seen, but it was art. He grabbed his board behind his back, legs tweaked in a way that defied skeletal limits, and floated. When he landed, the sport changed forever. The outsider had won the first ever Olympic gold in slopestyle. He proved to the USA and the world that snowboarding wasn't just about how many times you could spin, it was about how much soul you could put into the flight. Chapter 4. Pyeongchang and the Miracle of 17-year-old Red Gerard. Fast forward to 2018, the stakes had tripled. The Canadians, Max Parrott and Mark McMorris, were landing Triple Cork 1620s, 4.5 rotations in the air while flipping 3 times. Enter Red Gerard. The morning of the finals, Red was the definition of an American teenager. He had stayed up late watching Netflix, lost his puffy team jacket, and overslept. He had to be jolted awake, rushed to the mountain, and borrowed a jacket from his teammate. He was in 11th place after 2 runs. He had 1 shot left. As he stood at the top of the South Korean course, the wind was gusting at 30 miles per hour. Most riders were playing it safe. Red didn't. He took a unique line through the rails, the creative route, and then launched a backside Triple Cork 1440 on the final jump. The score, 87.16. The kid who lost his jacket was now the youngest American to win winter gold since 1928. The USA went wild. Slopestyle wasn't just a sport anymore. It was an American identity. Rifle marksmanship combined with sheer physical prowess in skiing, Aria was no ordinary athlete. He was a former U.S. Navy marksman. His lungs were as hard as iron. The height of Anthal's was 1,600 meters above sea level. Where breathing in thin air is difficult, Arya had to aim for a steady target after skiing 5 kilometers with her heart rate down. A snowstorm started on the day of the finals. Visibility was near zero. Favorite athletes from Norway and Germany were missing one after another. But when Arya picked up the rifle, the American audience saw a strange sight. He was as steady as a rock in the midst of the storm. Every shot hit the target. When he reached the finish line, his body was covered in snow, but in his hands was the first gold medal in biathlon history for America. The NBC commentator was shouting, "She didn't just beat the clock, she tamed the storm." Chapter 9. The Colosseum of Snow. Cortina's Bobsled Rebirth. Cortina d'Ampezzo, the city returned to the main stage of the Olympics after 1956. This time, the attraction here was the newly renovated Eugenio Monti track. It is one of the fastest and most dangerous bobsled tracks in the world. It was a personal battle for Team USA. They missed out on a medal by just a few milliseconds in Beijing 4 years ago. This time, their pilot was a former Texas football player, Marcus Jordan. Marcus knew he would have to fight to the death to win this track. As the bobsled hurtled down the hill at 130 kilometers per hour, the camera could only see a blur of white and blue. The G-force at every turn was crushing the athletes' bodies. Marcus's sled almost flipped over on the last bend, but he kept control with the strength of his muscular arms. When they crossed the finish line, the time difference was just 0.01 seconds. For the USA, this gold medal was a triumph of courage. Chapter 10. The Artificial Intelligence Revolution. The 2026 Olympics will be remembered not only for the games, but also for the technology. AI judging technology was used for the first time in Milan's ice rinks. In events like figure skating and snowboarding, where human judgment was accused of bias, AI was analyzing every movement with millimeter precision. As American snowboard legend Chloe Kim delivered the best ride of her last Olympic career, the AI screen displayed her height, rotation speed, and landing balance in real-time graphics. Viewers could sit at home and watch how science meets art. When Chloe Kim won her 3rd gold medal, it was not just an athlete's triumph, but a technologically recognized excellence. Chapter 11. The Shadow of the Crimson King. In the early 2010s, Shaun White, known globally as the Flying Tomato, was more than a snowboarder. He was a multinational corporation. He had the video games, the clothing lines, and the target on his back. While he was the undisputed king of the halfpipe, slopestyle was his white whale. The USA audience loved a crossover. They wanted to see if the greatest pipe rider in history could transition to the Wild West of the slopestyle course. In the lead-up to Sochi 2014, the pressure was suffocating. NBC had built their entire primetime marketing campaign around White winning 2 gold medals in 2 different disciplines. But slopestyle is a cruel mistress. It requires a different kind of pop. In the pipe, you use the transition to generate speed. In slopestyle, you have to fight the flat-bottom impact of a 60-foot drop. During practice, White took a terrifying slam on the rails. He looked at the massive triple jumps, the very ones that would eventually crown Sage Kotsenburg, and made a choice that shocked the nation. He pulled out. The king had blinked. But in his absence, a vacuum was created, and the young guns rushed in to fill it. This moment marked the end of the solo superstar era and the beginning of the Wolfpack era of American snowboarding. Chapter 12. The Brotherhood of the Van. To understand the 50,000-word reality of this sport, you have to look past the Olympic Village. You have to look at the Project Detour vans. While the elite skiers were staying in 5-star hotels with physical therapists, the American slopestyle team was often a group of teenagers living out of renovated Ford Econolines. They parked in the lots of Mammoth Mountain and Breckenridge, cooking ramen on camping stoves and filming each other on iPhones. This vagabond culture is why the USA remains dominant. There's an unspoken rule in slopestyle. If your friend lands a trick, you have to land it better. This isn't coached, it's tribal. In the 2020s, riders like Dusty Henriksen and Luke Winkleman began a push-pull dynamic. They would spend 8 hours a day on the T-bar lift, hitting the same rail 300 times until their shins bled. They weren't training for the Olympics, they were training for each other's respect. By the time they reached the Olympic qualifiers, the actual competition felt easier compared to the sessions back home. Chapter 14. The Anatomy of a Crash. The Physics of Failure. We talk about the gold, but we must talk about the ice. At the speeds required for slopestyle, the snow isn't fluffy powder, it is blue ice, chemically treated and water-injected to be as hard as a sidewalk. When a rider scorpions, lands on their chest while their board whips over their head to hit them in the back of the helmet, the force is equivalent to a low-speed car accident. In the 2022 Beijing qualifiers, the world held its breath as several top-tier riders were carted off on sleds. The wind was a crosstail, the most dangerous kind. It pushes the rider sideways in mid-air. To survive, the athlete must use their arms like gyroscopes. L equals I times omega is the law of the land. By pulling their arms in tight, decreasing the moment of inertia I, they spin faster, omega. To slow down for the landing, they starfish their limbs out. If the wind catches a starfish at 50 miles per hour, it can flip the rider like a piece of paper. This is the hidden battle every audience member feels in their gut but doesn't see on the scoreboard. Chapter 15. The Style Tax. The American Protest. In recent years, a civil war has emerged within the sport. The technical robots, who favor more spins, versus the stylists, who favor more tweak. The USA has led the style protest. Riders began intentionally doing fewer rotations but holding their grabs longer. A mute grab held for 3 seconds while floating 80 feet is, to an American purist, worth more than a 3-cork 10-footer where the rider looks like a flailing ceiling fan. This tension came to a head in the most recent World Cups. The judges, pressured by the core snowboarding community, began rewarding creative use of course.
Instead of hitting the jump straight on, the Americans started gapping, jumping over the stairs entirely, or sliding the donkey kink on the rails. They turned the rigid Olympic course into a jazz improvisation. Chapter 15, The Final Stretch, Why We Watch. As we look toward the 2026 Winter Games in Milan Cortina, the narrative has come full circle. The kids who grew up watching Sage Kotsenburg and Red Gerard are now the veterans. The boards have changed, carbon fiber stringers and magna traction edges now allow for turns on sheer ice. The suits are aerodynamic, but the man on the board remains the same, a person willing to trade their physical safety for a moment of perfect crystalline silence at the apex of a jump. When the American anthem plays over a slopestyle podium, it isn't just for a sport, it's for the culture of the misfits who took over the mountain. From the no snowboarding signs of the 80s to the prime-time global stage, the journey of slopestyle is the ultimate American underdog story. The glitz of the Olympic podium has a shadow, and as the sport of slopestyle matured, the riders began to realize that the highest air often led to the deepest lows. To understand the true weight of the American slopestyle story, we must look at what happens when the cameras turn off and the adrenaline, the natural chemical that keeps these athletes functioning, finally drains away. Chapter 16, The Gravity of the Mind, the Post-Olympic Blues. For an American teenager like Red Gerard or Sage Kotsenburg, the transition from a nobody in a small mountain town to a global icon happens in exactly 60 seconds, the duration of a gold medal run. The post-Olympic blues is a documented phenomenon in the USA snowboarding community. Imagine reaching the absolute pinnacle of human achievement at age 17. You've conquered gravity, won the gold, and appeared on every late-night talk show from New York to Los Angeles. Then, 3 months later, you're back in Colorado, staring at a frozen trailhead, wondering, what now? The mental health battle became a central theme of the sport. The pressure to repeat the gold is a weight heavier than any lead. We saw this with the legendary Shaun, who admitted that his 4th place in Sochi haunted his dreams for 4 years. The perfectionism required to land a 3-cork 1620 often translates into an obsessive mental state that is hard to shut off. Chapter 18, The Gear Wars, the Secret Science of the Board. While the riders were battling their minds, engineers in Burlington, Vermont and Seattle, Washington were battling the laws of friction. The boards used in the early days of slopestyle were essentially glorified planks of wood. Today, a competitive slopestyle board is a masterpiece of aerospace engineering. The core, using paulownia and aspen wood strips layered with carbon fiber V-stringers that act like a catapult, snapping the board back into shape after a flex to provide pop. The edges, magna traction technology, serrated edges like a steak knife, was developed specifically to allow riders to hold a carve on the blue ice of Olympic jumps without washing out. The wax, this is the dark art of the sport. Teams hire wax techs who use secret fluorocarbon blends. If the snow is minus 10 degrees and the humidity is 20%, the wax must be different than if it's minus 2 degrees. A mistake in wax choice means a rider doesn't have enough speed to clear the 60-foot gap. If they case or land short on the knuckle of the jump, the impact can shatter a tibia instantly. Chapter 19, The Rise of the Filmer Culture. The USA audience doesn't just consume the Olympics, they consume edits. In the slopestyle world, a gold medal is prestigious, but a video part is eternal. American riders like Dusty Henriksen and Brock Crouch began spending their off-seasons in the streets. They took their Olympic-level skills to the urban landscapes of Helsinki or Quebec City, jumping over stair railings and off the roofs of buildings. This created a unique tension. The International Olympic Committee wanted clean-cut athletes, but the core snowboarding fans wanted street cred. The American riders successfully bridged this gap. They proved you could be a professional athlete with a Nike contract and still be a dirtbag snowboarder who films in the middle of the night to avoid the police. This dual identity is what makes the USA Slopestyle team the most marketable athletes in winter sports. Chapter 20. The triple is not enough. The 1980 era. As we approached the 2026 cycle, a new number began to haunt the riders, 1980. That is 5.5 full rotations in the air. 1980 degrees equals 5.5 spins. When Taiga Hasegawa and the USA Youngbloods started whispering about the 1980, the veterans shook their heads. At that speed of rotation, the centrifugal force is so high it starts to pull the blood away from the rider's brain. It is the G-force of snowboarding. The safety versus progression debate reached the U.S. Ski and Snowboard headquarters.
How much can the human frame take? The answer, it seems, is always more. The American riders began using gyroscope sensors in their helmets during practice to measure head impact and rotation speed, turning the misfit sport into a data-driven science. Chapter 20. The Final Jump, a Legacy in the Clouds. The story of men's Olympic slopestyle is a story of the American dream on ice. It's about taking a toy, the snowboard, and using it to conquer the most prestigious sporting stage in the world. It's about the kid who forgot his jacket, Red Gerard, the kid who ate onion rings for breakfast, Sage Kotsenburg, and the veteran who refused to give up his crown, Shaun. They showed the USA audience that winning isn't just about the score, it's about the stomp. The stomp is that moment when a rider lands perfectly bolt upright, hands out, gliding away from a 100-foot jump as if they were just walking off a curb. It is the ultimate expression of human grace under extreme pressure. Epilogue. The 2026 Horizon. As the sun sets over the mountains of Cortina, Italy for the upcoming Games, a new generation of American riders stands at the top of the scaffold. They aren't just carrying boards, they are carrying the history of a 30-year revolution. They look down the icy slope, adjust their goggles, and drop in. Because in slopestyle, the only way to find out where the limit is to cross it.